St. Louis sports fans, go deeper with STL Sports Central Insiders. Get exclusive access to Bernie, Randy, Claibs, Jamal Mayers, and more. Plus, your chance to watch a Blues game in the alumni box with Jamal himself. Monthly giveaways, Bernie's columns all week, and support for local sports media. Join now at stlsportscentral.com.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Here we are. We call it Huddle Up with Howard. He's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. And Howard, we have so much ground to cover today, man. The college bowl situation is starting to take shape as far as the playoffs are concerned. We have championship weekend on the college scene as far as the conferences are concerned. We still have some interesting jobs to be filled. We also had two jobs that were filled this week. One was a retainer in Eli Drinkwitz staying at Missouri. And then this other circus created by Jimmy Sexton and Lane Kiffin, which I thought was embarrassing in so many ways. And we, as I mentioned, have a lot of jobs open. And then here's the NFL, which I don't know who's any good anymore. Just when you think this team is ready to go, they stub their toe. And then you have some teams that find themselves still relevant as far as postseason is concerned. I said to you at the beginning of the year, I thought this was going to be an epic season for college and pro football. And I think I'm right about it because we're having discussions we never thought we would have happen about where the leagues and where the conferences are going.
One word that applies to both college football and the National Football League. It's
chaos.
Chaos. Okay, two words: chaos and parity. The parity, just from the parity standpoint, looking at the college level, really you can see that NIL and the ability for players to move much more freely than they've ever been able to via the transfer portal has, I thought, brought teams that were near or at the bottom in the middle. They brought them closer to the top.
Yeah,
you see that in the SEC, of course. A team like Vanderbilt that was a perennial, hate to use the term, but doormat, but
yeah,
where they were. And because Clark Lee, who to me has done a fantastic job through his evaluation of players in recruitment, gone out and been able to bring in players that he knew he needed to be able to compete in the SEC, and now they've got a shot at being one of the teams that are included in the college football playoff. Not saying that they will, but this is a completely new talk track for the Vanderbilt Commodores, somewhere that they've never been before, and now they're on the verge of, they could conceivably get in depending on what happens this weekend.
Well, so I'm glad you brought up Clark Lee's name because I think he and the Indiana coach or guys that have to have heavy consideration for national coach of the year and what they've been able to do for those programs and putting them on the map. And it doesn't look like that well is going to dry up anytime soon.
No, I totally agree. And it's a shame that only one coach can only be, named as coach of the year, because there are probably a few that fit into that boat. Both very deserving. I mean, Curt Cignetti proved that Indiana wasn't a one-hit wonder. They're going to be back in the playoff again. And again, Indiana is another one of those teams that benefits by the transfer portal and NIL. And they've used it to their advantage. And, kudos to them for being able to move the needle with regard to where their programs are.
So with those programs having success, are they going to be the new template on how you build a program? Because, we've seen other schools, because of their name, whether it's Ohio State or Texas or some of the teams that have always been constants, they roll their name out along with a big checkbook and somebody's going to go there. Well, Indiana and Vanderbilt didn't have that tradition, and I don't know how deep their pockets are. Obviously, they were able to really, I think, scout well to find players that were going to fit what they were trying to do. But would they be the new template for a lot of programs who feel like this is the best way for us to get healthy, other than going out and raising $25 million and just throwing money at players that we don't even know really are conducive to who we are as a program?
Well, that's a very good point. And I look at it this way. It's more than just, the process of acquisitions, right? It's also about how you how those players fit into the system, or conversely, how you adapt your systems to the talents of those players. But also development, figuring out, where this particular guy or group of guys, what talents can we exploit that fit our needs and help us get to the top based on the teams that we're going to play. But I think they do a good job of game planning from week to week. It's not necessarily just the same old program,
Yeah.
And they're playing complementary football, which is what you have to have when you're playing at a championship competition level. And that's what they're doing, especially Indiana. Should be a really good, fascinating ball game on Saturday when they play Ohio State. And if Indiana figures out a way and wins this game, I don't think, people like me and you will be surprised at all.
No, not at all. I mean, I think they've earned their stripes. We could always go back and talk about everybody's schedule. And I really think that, like, Indiana said, hey, you know what? We're already playing a good conference. We stepped out and handled our business as well. We won on the road. They did a lot of things that you want them to do. So, I like where they're going. I think that's going to be a scuffle. And I think Ohio State's one of the few teams that might be able to answer. Although Michigan may expose them in a couple of areas, I think that Ohio State's going to have their hands full against Indiana.
Yeah, I do too. And I think, listen, playing in Indiana's backyard.
There you go.
At Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Listen, there should be a sea of red or crimson, whatever their colors are, in that stadium on Saturday night.
You won't be able to tell the difference between the programs, as far as the color schemes are concerned. So it's going to be fun. You know what? And they're going to have a good scuffle down in Atlanta with Alabama and Georgia. These two teams have faced each other. The coaches know each other as well as anyone. It's going to be a battle. I don't think that's going to be anything to sneeze at either. And the rest of the conference championships, I know you got to have them, but I don't know if they wet the whistle for me as those two games will when you think about what's at stake on Saturday.
Yeah, I think we're probably spoiled. Going back to Georgia, probably the most under the radar team in the SEC this year. You just haven't heard a whole lot about them. Yet here they are playing in the championship game yet again with, Kirby Smart, who, in a lot of ways, man, I think Kirby Smart is probably the best coach in this league because what he's been able to sustain. Yeah, he's had some issues at Georgia, but if you listen to Kirby Smart's press conferences, there is a bit of philosophy that he spits out every week that it's more than just X's and O's. I mean, he makes very good points. And I've actually grown to really enjoy what he brings to the table as the head of that program down in Athens.
And you know what I like about him, man? He adapts. He adapts well. I mean, he's always going to have first-round draft choices on his team. But he's been able to win with various quarterbacks. He's lost some skilled players in certain areas, especially in the line. But he finds a way to make them ready to go on Saturday, man. And I agree with you. I think he's maybe, now that Nick Saban's out of the business, I think he's the most versatile coach there is in the game. Yeah. And he has the resources, but I think he could coach anywhere, anytime, just from a preparation standpoint. His demeanor, I think, is one we as fans appreciate because he's not a hoot and hollering guy. But I think the way he handles things just says a lot about who he is. And you think about his upbringing and all the coaches he's coached with over the course of time. He's taken a little bit of a lot of guys to put himself in this position.
He's the closest thing, I think, at the collegiate level to an NFL coach. And again, listening to a lot of the points that he makes in his press conferences, you would think that he's had NFL experience as a coach. Still wouldn't surprise me if at some point, within the next few years, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, that he jumps and coaches a team in the NFL. To me, he would be perfect for the New York Giants. I just think he would bring something completely special and something needed, that toughness, but also, to me, more thorough evaluation of players as they move forward.
Kirby Smart's too smart to take that job. He's
That
too smart.
says it on his last name, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't care who he's sending there these days. It's never going to work. Whether it's ownership or the front office, it's just coaches just go there to die. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why you look back and you think about Parcells could have stayed there forever, but even Parcells saw writing on the wall. It just isn't a place you can win anymore. I think about the guy who went down ended up going down to Jacksonville, Tom Coughlin. He saw the writing on the wall. And then we've seen so many guys go in there thinking that they could do the job. I go back to Ray Hanley. Ray Perkins was the first guy, and then followed by Parcells. But remember the other guy, Ray Hanley? Everybody thought he was going to be next, and man, he was a disaster. And there's been one after another, one general manager after another. And I just don't know if you can ever win there, especially in this day and age in what the demands are. It's just not. And the same thing be said for the Jets. I don't think New York is a great football place to coach.
Hey, Missouri, your moment is finally here because DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is now live in your state. And here in Missouri, we can make every game even more exciting with same-game parlays, money lines, props, and more, all from your phone, all safe, all secure, and all easy to use. Missouri fans know game day, the tailgates, the noise, the passion. Now with DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bring that same energy to every snap and every touchdown and every win. And right now, Missouri customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. No waiting, no nonsense, just pure action powered by America's top-rated sportsbook app. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code STL Sports. New Missouri customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. That's code STL Sports. The crown is yours in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 and over. Physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. One single use odds boost per customer. Market boosted to plus 100 odds. Max bet $50. Expires at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time, December 7th. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
It is surprising. I mean, obviously the Giants have won one Super Bowl or two.
They won a couple. They won Parcells won twice there.
Yeah. So it's not impossible, but the game has changed somewhat. You're going to need a personality like Parcells who brings that level of toughness. And that's why I suggested if you're going to move a coach from the college ranks to that area, that Kirby Smart would be, to me, the likely choice. But
wait a minute, you mean to tell me you wouldn't send Lane Kiffin there?
Yeah, I don't think he would survive there. I really don't.
I don't think he doesn't survive anywhere.
I don't think it would be. I think it would be too much of a circus. I don't know that Lane.
But he likes the circus, though.
He does like the circus. But eventually the circus leaves town, right?
True.
and all wants to go away with them. And
the thing is, and let's talk about the Ole Miss situation. Hey, I don't blame anybody for wanting to leave Mississippi for anything, okay? I mean, it is what it is. But the way he strung that thing out, and I thought the players were the ones that were most misserved by what he did. And you saw some players kind of push back. But the way he led that program and that state on, and then had the nerve to say, but I'll stick around and coach him for you. What the hell with you, man? You remember when Bo Schembechler, when Steve Fisher who was the guy? It wasn't Steve Fisher. Steve Fisher took over for the other guy in basketball when they had the Fab Four.
Yeah. And
he said, I'm only going to have a Michigan man coach my team.
That's right.
Yeah. And I commend the athletic director at Ole Miss. And I'm sure it was tempting because there was Bill Frieder, right? I'm sure it was tempting for him to keep the band together, but the band had already left, and I just felt like the way he strung that whole thing out, I thought was really unfair to everyone there. I'm not a big fan. I remember when he was with the Oakland Raiders and he hired one of the best assistant coaches I know in Charlie Coe to be the receivers coach, and let him go after 1 year because he thought he could hire somebody else who had a bigger name, who had never coached. And, I don't know a lot of assistants that follow Lane Kiffin everywhere either. I mean, is he a great coach? No, I don't think so. I think he's a guy who's been able to manipulate the system, but he couldn't coach for me because I'm not going to sit there and play that game every 2 years on what do we have to do in order to keep Coach Kiffin, who, by the way, has never won anything. Never. I haven't seen him in a championship game anywhere. Have you?
No, not as a head coach. No, not at all. It's, do they think that it's a given or an automatic that if you jump from one institution to the other, that it's going to happen? My guess is he clearly thinks that he is capable. Maybe he has a true, a really high opinion of himself. But that's probably the definition of narcissism at its best. Yeah. Thinking more about yourself than others do.
Well, yeah, and just there's so much roadkill on the side of the road from the people he's left in the wake.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, I would give his agent Jimmy Sexton credit. I had a chance to see some of his contract, and Jimmy didn't miss anything. And I know Jimmy Sexton from back in the days when he and Kyle Rote Jr. started their firm out of Memphis. And Jimmy has done a really good job in getting his coaches play. So I tip my cap to him. And he's getting paid enough to be the bad guy. But it's a good contract. He's got some really good coaches. And I tip my cap to him. But, man, the whole school's hostage like this is just really – it's unfortunate that it's come to this. And you keep hearing coaches say, we got to change this. Well, how do you change it? I don't know how you change it.
I don't have the answer.
All right, let's move on to talk a little NFL before we get out of here. As I mentioned to you at the beginning, I don't know who's good anymore. I think the Rams are pretty good. I thought the Eagles were very good. I even thought Seattle was a team you might want to think about playing against. And then there's some teams that in the background you wonder about. Can Baltimore pull together because they have a very versatile offense? Is Kansas City done? There's some teams that are lurking that as we get deeper into December, you better watch out.
And we don't know who they are yet.
Yeah.
And maybe this weekend will be the weekend that I think teams may start to separate. This is week 13 or something like that.
14.
Yeah. And typically in December is when you do start to see that separation. But you've got a team like the Broncos, are they for real with a second-year quarterback?
A 30-year-old second-year quarterback. How old is Bo Nix? Bo Nix is older than
Medicare, Mike.
Yeah,
he's like us.
Exactly. He has more gray hair in the huddle than he's already colored his hair already. I mean, he's old. He's old in football life. He's definitely old.
But so the teams I think that we must keep an eye on, teams that have not been great lately or even good, the Broncos, the Colts, the Chargers trying to make a run. You've got to look at the two most recent expansion teams, Carolina and Jacksonville, both playing very well, given where they have been, right? Bryce Young is starting to emerge as a franchise type quarterback.
That's what they drafted him for. When you're the first pick, they didn't.
But he also didn't have any pieces.
He had no help. You're right. When they drafted him, he had no help, and I thought he was going to go the way of David Carr as a pincushion because of all the hits he was taking. And he's not a big guy.
Not at all. I mean, 5'10". He's got to be the smallest starting quarterback in the league. But they're going to have to continue to, improve and build around him because of his size. They need to develop a strong running game and find some receivers that they're going to be able to depend on, week in and week out. That's what you need, right? You need playmakers that aren't going to disappear, when the going gets tough.
What about the coaching situation? Well, let me back up. There's like 2/3 of the teams in the NFL are still legitimately in this thing. I mean, with the exception of Tennessee and Cleveland and a couple other teams, I mean, everybody has a legitimate shot. And now, granted, some of them have their backs to the wall already, and they literally have to win out and get some help from somebody else. But you said it at the beginning, parity, and this is what we live for, man. This is what we're on top of, which leads me to the coaching situations around the league. Now the heat's on Mike Tomlin a little bit more, and Mike Tomlin had no problem in pushing back about what other people thought of him and what the job he was doing. Where are we going with this? Because we're going to have some coaches that are going to find themselves on the outside looking in before this is over with.
And as good as Tomlin has been, does complacency play a role in all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that he's been complacent as a coach, but the organization, some of the moves that they haven't made, I think really affect, what their win-loss record is and, how they're viewed going forward. Just look at the George Pickens deal. How do you let Pickens go, who to me was just kind of, scratching the surface in Pittsburgh, and could very well have been because of the quarterback situation. Pickens goes to Dallas and he's thriving, and has really taken over the wide receiver 1 role from CeeDee Lamb because some of the struggles and injuries that Lamb has had this year.
But, on the other side of that coin, I always thought Mike Tomlin saw when it was time to get rid of a person before everybody else did. And I go back to Antonio Brown. And there have been some other guys that he's moved on from that have gone on to do nothing after they left Pittsburgh. Juju Smith-Schuster is a good example. I mean, I think there's more guys that Tomlin realized couldn't help the Steelers, let alone anybody else in the league. And they moved on from it. I gave you a good example. Minkah Fitzpatrick. They traded for him. And Minkah Fitzpatrick was as good of a safety as there was in the league for about a 4 or 5 year run. And guess what? Minkah Fitzpatrick got traded back to Miami. I mean, so they knew something. That didn't mean that the Steelers were better, but I just think Tomlin had that knack of being able to see that this guy can't help. And I wonder if they had to do all over again, would you have brought in the quarterback?
Yeah.
I thought it was a bad move from day one, and I'll stick by that. I don't think he's getting much help from the offensive coordinator because I think their offense is rather bland. And I also think the reason it's bland is because I don't think they've drafted well when it comes to the offensive line. So there are a lot of components to go into the fact that the mediocrity that we see with the Pittsburgh Steelers is not just solely on the shoulders of Mike Tomlin.
That's what I meant when I brought up the term complacency. Not so much from Tomlin, but those that are evaluating talent within the organization. And I think you really have to point to that because it's not just a one-off. You're seeing layers of it in different areas, position by position. So that's a point you make. Everyone wants to put everything on the shoulders of the coach. And, a lot of times coaches do bear their responsibility. But we know in the NFL, you can only coach the talent that you're providing.
Yeah.
And that, I think a lot of people need to look beyond what head coaching, it is and what it really isn't.
I think that's one of the great debates. If you're the head coach, how much say-so do you have in the kind of players you need to have to run your system? We've seen a few guys like Paul Holmgren that was coaching general manager. He knew what he wanted. And he went out and drafted it. Or he told his guys, these are the players we want. I don't know how many coaches sit in the draft room or in the scout meetings and say, look, these are the players we're looking for to be able to run our offense. Because in that case, that means your offensive coordinator needs to be in the room. Your defensive coordinator needs to be in the room. Your line coach. So now I'm not sure how much you gain because now there's just maybe too many cooks in the kitchen as you try and develop what your organization looks like. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of teams run into. Where do you draw the line with regard to what you need compared to what I'm giving you?
And not just in the room on draft day.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. Well, before those guys go out and scout.
Yeah.
These are the guys we're looking for.
You have to communicate, look, here's what we need. And sometimes, the coaches will also go to some of these all-star games and visit, during the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl, so they can get eyes on those players that potentially could be a part of their organization, or at least those that they're interested in. I remember my senior year, I played in the Senior Bowl, and as you know, it's the championship. I think it's the championship, or the runners up to the championship game. I think that's the way it is at the time, are the ones that coach for the NFC
Right.
and the AFC. So my senior year in the Senior Bowl, the North squad was coached by Bill Walsh and his staff. And, it was the first time that I had, played the position of guard in the Senior Bowl, right? So Bob McKittrick, the late Bob McKittrick, who was the offensive
Oh yeah,
coach,
he was a beauty.
he talked to me. He goes, we want to get a chance to see where you fit in. We know you can play tackle. He goes, but we want to see how versatile you are. We want to move you inside and play you at guard this week. And, I was reluctant, but then I thought about it and I thought, well, these guys know. They know more about it than I do. I need, if they're talking about versatility and see, if I can fit in more than one place, if they're going to slot me here, I owe it to myself to give it a shot. And I remember the very first play we ran with what they called the Bob sweep. It basically was what many people knew that that USC used to run, student body
right, student body left. Yeah.
Basic sweep. You got a lead back, both guards pulling, and you get guys out in front, and the running back gets to pick and choose the daylight. So anyway, we run the Bob sweep. The first play, I'm pulling on the onside guard, and I pull, and the first guy I see is the safeties, Hanford Dixon, who was also a first-round
good player. Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati or Cleveland?
Cleveland.
Yeah.
And I lit up Hanford Dixon, and that's when I knew. I'm like, okay, I kind
of like this.
I do, because you're protected inside from a pass protection standpoint by a tackle and by your center. So that island is, it's reduced. And so 3 years later, when I'm in Dallas, and I had 3 good years at guard, and all of a sudden Pat Donovan retires at left tackle, the former All-Pro. They want to move me back out to left tackle. And I'm like, I'm comfortable here at guard. Herb's going to retire, Herb Scott, another All-Pro. I want to stay here because it's easier. It's easier playing inside. And then it was a talk, well, you're versatile. You can do this. We need you to do this for the team. And
they tell you anything you want to hear. They think you want to hear.
And, still a young player. I'm a fourth-year player. I'm 24, 25 years old. I'm like, okay, this is a Cowboys organization. You got to acquiesce. You got to do what they tell you to do. But for me, it was frustrating because I knew where I was going at that position. I thought that if I have another solid year, I could be a Pro Bowl player at the position. It didn't happen. Nonetheless, it's how you take and evaluate talent. You look at guys and figure out where I can slot them, where they're going to be able to help us as a team. So I'm saying this to say, I think the 49ers did a really good job in looking at the talent on their Senior Bowl roster and saying, we want to see where these guys go, because he could end up playing for us at one point. So as it turns out, they ended up drafting Ronnie Lott in the first round, which was
that worked out.
Yeah, but just the process of undergoing, just getting a chance to see it from a player standpoint, but understanding, how administration, how the coaching staff communicates with their scouts and say, here's what we're looking for. Now we're on site. We want to see if we think this particular guy or guys can play multiple positions, because if they can, then they are going to be options for us as we draft and move forward in this organization.
As we end on this story, we talked about scouting and how important it can be. Football Cardinals had a guy who was one of their head scouts. His name is Harry Gilmer. He had a very good career as a player and a reasonable coach. So I see him at one of the games, and I say, well, hey, Harry, how's scouting? Or what do you have? What area? He said, well, I've got the South. I got the South and Southeast. I said, oh, okay. I said, what do you think about Jerry Rice? or Jake Reed, and there was another guy. Back then, the SWAC, they had Jerry Rice, Jake Reed. There was like 4 or 5 guys. LaRue Harrington, who was a running back, he followed Walter Payton. I mean, back then it was loaded with players. And so he said, "What school are you talking about?" I said, "Well, Jerry Rice is Mississippi Valley." He said, "Oh, we don't scout them schools." That told me all I needed to know about where the football Cardinals were going. When you could tell me you don't scout the HBCU schools when everybody else was, and that's why you were getting your ass kicked on Sunday, because you didn't have any of them.
Well, and that's where I think at the time, until the dip occurred with Dallas, how do you find guys like Rayfield Wright, who's a basketball player, and Preston Pearson, who they got from Pittsburgh, where they had scouted them?
Yeah.
Or
we'll go back to Jeff Pugh.
Well, yeah, and how about a guy who led the league in interceptions in 1981 as a rookie? Okay, for those who don't know, he lived at home with his mother for 2 years and made the NFL minimum salary of $25,000 per year. Led the league in interceptions and didn't even start all 16 games. We're talking about.
By the way, didn't get drafted.
Didn't get drafted. So that just shows you, how the scouting machine, if guys are doing their job, they're going to find where the good players are and find a way to play them.
He's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. Man, this was fun. We got to get Everson Walls on one day. We got to talk to him, because I think he's one of the more fascinating stories, and really should be in the Hall of Fame. You saw where the senior candidates were out there, and I can't argue with any of those guys. All those guys are phenomenal, and it's unfortunate they're only going to take one.
Well, that's where I think it needs to change.
Yeah,
everything has to evolve, right, Mike? And with the great players that have played this game throughout the league, it's a shame that so many deserving players have to wait so long and often don't go get in until they've passed away. I think that needs to change. There's only 300 something players in the Hall of Fame anyway. And
if that many.
How long have they been playing this game?
Over 100 years.
I can appreciate being very selective, but if you got one great player at a position, trust me, there's probably another one someplace else that's being overlooked.
I couldn't agree with you more. Again, he's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. This has been another installment of what we love to call Huddle Up with Howard. We'll talk to you next week, because we'll have some more good football to talk about. We'll know who's going to be playing where. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if they don't have Missouri and Illinois playing in a bowl game against each other, they're nuts. We're out.